everyone, and welcome to my session here at TestJS Summit this year. I'm so glad you're spending your time with me to learn about all the things I myself screwed up. Yeah, I know, that sounds harsh, but honestly, I hope to learn from my past mistakes together with you all, so thank you so much for being here. And let's get started, right? Let me start in another way. I'm Ramona, and welcome to the premiere episode of Mo Presents Fun with Test. Side note, Mo is a little nickname for me. But let's stop being silly and let's get serious instead. I'm working as a software developer at Schwering, which is a company providing an open source e-commerce platform. But I have a couple of years experience in quality assurance as well, so I know both views of the product or of an application, that of a tester and that of a developer. And I strive to make the experience of both better. Let's call it developer and tester experience alike. And this is basically the reason why I started to think about this session, this talk. To get to the point, let's think about the following situation, or it's more thought. There are a couple of movies I loved watching in my childhood, and even as an adult, I rewatched them numerous times. And one franchise of those is Star Wars. And there's one quote in particular from the 1983 Star Wars film Episode 6, which is Return of the Jedi, which sticked into my mind. And it's this one. It's a trap. Well, every terrible mimicking skills of me aside, it's really a memorable quote said by Admiral Akbar, who is the leader of the Mon Calamari rebels. And it was said during the Battle of Endor, where the Alliance mobilized its forces in a concerted effort to destroy the Death Star. And Akbar encounters an unexpected ambush there, which leads him to exclaim this quote. So, yeah, it's a nice quote, right? You think? You will wonder, well, what it has to do with testing. And yes, I think it has to do something with testing. It's a nice allegory when it comes to testing. Testing has so many perks and advantages, and I don't think I need to convince you about that here in this session. But all those wonderful things when it comes to testing can be outshadowed though by pain points caused by various reasons. Many of them can be considered traps, and they may feel like an ambush. Things you did in best intent, of course, but turning out to be painful in the long run, or even earlier. Well, when it comes to my beginnings, my tester or developer career, I think about 3 pain points, especially when it comes to pain. The first being slow tests, which can happen by various reasons. And you can imagine if you want to finish a feature or a task or a ticket and you want to merge your pull request so badly, but you need to wait for the pipelines to run. That's awful. Second, and maybe more important, I think about tests which are painful to maintain. For example, a test I don't understand when looking at it months or even years later. Well, even fellow team members asking me what I thought I wanted to achieve with this test. So, well, I think bad things happen, right? But it's not the worst pain point I felt when it comes to working with tests. It's about this one. Tests give you no value, no clear result at all. You may call them Heisen fails or Heisen tests, like the famous Heisen bug, which only occurs if you look away, don't debug results. And there's the end boss, flaky tests, which are non-determinant. Tests who fail to deliver the same correct value in between builds. Imagine a test passing the first time, failing the second, and passing the third time. A test you cannot trust, right? But well, it doesn't have to be this way. Let me show you my biggest failures when it comes to tests and how to correct them. What to keep in mind when it comes to writing good tests and to avoiding these pitfall traps. Well, due to the time limit, I cannot mention all of them, but let's speak about others, like some I encountered or your experience later on in the Q&A or even later. The first and most important thing inside of my mind is the following situation. Please look at it first. Maybe you find yourself familiar in it. Well, think about your doing a task, coding, and your brain is full with the main production code, and you have no headspace left for any additional complexity. Every task which comes on top shouldn't eat headspace then, or be exhausting to you. Otherwise, it will be painful to you. So, eating more headspace is against the intent of testing and even cause team to abandon testing at all in the worst case. So, avoiding tests to eat headspace is the most important thing in testing, in my opinion. And I'm not alone with that. Yoni Goldberg describes it as a golden rule, and it is the following one. It's basically keep it stupid simple. Tests should be designed plain simple in every case, and it doesn't matter if we are talking about unit or end-to-end testing. Our goal should be the following. One should look at your test and get its intent instantly, without thinking about it, basically. So, yes, test is not totally like production code, not completely. And yeah, I know that you should treat your test code with the same care as you do with production code. But some best practices applied to production code aren't suitable for tests or are in conflict with tests. For example, when I'm thinking about the application or the dry principle. So please try to use less to no abstractions inside of your tests to keep them comprehensible. So that also means be cautious when it comes to commands or page objects in end-to-end, for example. I like to describe it as a flat or minimal test design. So testing only as much as needed belongs to that as well. In this case, you will keep your tests comprehensible and delightful to work with. And this is a principle which can be applied to basically all the following examples. So I'm speaking about examples, right? Let's take a look at them. Look at this little code snippet. Especially when it comes to the test title. It's a jest snippet, but it's still applicable to end-to-end testing as well. When you look at this test, do you know what it wants to accomplish? For example, if you look at your test log, if this test is failing, do you know what it's about or what could be wrong inside of it? Well, it should throw an error, but which error? When should it be thrown? Anything? Remember our golden rule. You should know instantly what your test is doing. So we need to improve it, right? Let's take a look. This one is the 3-part rule by Roy Osheworth, which could come in handy in this case. It will help you with keeping clear what your test wants to cover and accomplish. It's well known from unit testing, but maybe it's not that bad to keep it in mind when it comes to end-to-end or integration testing as well. The 3-part rule basically says you should have a test containing 3 parts. 1, what is being tested? In this case, it's the property. 2, under what circumstances and scenario we test, which is the usage of the deprecated property in our example. And 3, what is the expected result of the test? In this case, the error thrown. So we have this little title here, which is not that little anymore, but it's more comprehensible. And if you think about longer test titles, Longcat is long, test name is long. Longcat likes long test titles because you can see the result of the test in first sight. and you don't need to read through all logs or the source code to get what's wrong inside of this test. Alright, next trap. Look at this test. Do you see and get it in first sight? If yes, I got to say props to you. You're really quick, but if you don't, that's totally normal and no problem at all, because this test structure is a mess. You see, declarations, assertions, and actions are really more needed without any structure at all. So how can we change this test to get it easier to understand? Well, I like to use the AAA pattern, which is short for arrange, act, assert. So again, this is well known from unit testing, so I'll use a jest example here. But yes, it's not that good for end-to-end tests, which tend to be a bit longer, but it's still worth mentioning here. The AAA pattern says you should structure your test in 3 parts. First, the arrange part, which is dealing with the setup to bring the system to the scenario the test aims to simulate. Think about variables, dubbing or mocking, for example. The second one is about running your test. Basically, the act part, running your unit under test, your steps, actions, etc. to get to the result state. And third, the assert part, which is quite self-explanatory. So you do the assertions and checks of your test scenario inside of it, which makes the AAA pattern another way of designing your test in a simple way. You can basically get the test instance in first sight, which is really, really important. Alright, next one. Another slide, another trap. And we got BB-8 from Star Wars as a guest, and he found a name which might be familiar to us, but not to him, not to BB-8. It's Fubar. Well, we as developer know that Fubar is often used as a placeholder name, but if you see it inside of a test, do you directly know what it stands for? Again, this way your test may be more difficult to understand at first sight, so we should avoid that. But what should we do instead? Let's take a look. In this case, I brought you a little Cypress test. So it's an end-to-end test in this case, but this advice is not limited to that. You can use it in integration or unit testing as well. This test should check if a product can be created and read. So in it, I want to use names and placeholders connected to a real actual product. So when it comes to the t-shirt, I use T-shirt Akbar because it's a t-shirt with Akbar, I don't know. And when it comes to the manufacturer, I want to use Space Company as a name so that you can see that I'm dealing with a product, for example. Well, if you don't want to invent all the names by yourself, you can use Faker to generate data or even import it from a production state. So maybe you see, I want to stick to the golden rule we mentioned, even when it comes to naming. New trap, same tests. Did you notice these selectors here? They are CSS selector. And you might say now, okay, but well, I can have unique CSS selector, they work, right? Why are they problematic? Well, because they are prone to change. If you, for example, refactor your application and change classes, the test may fail even if you didn't introduce a bug. And a test failing without a bug is a false negative, giving no reliable report on your application, as you just changed the implementation and it don't report an error, right? So this trap refers mainly to end-to-end tests in this particular case, but in other circumstances, it might apply to unit testing as well as soon as you use selectors. So look at selectors you must, Yoda would say. So you shouldn't test implementation details at all. Instead, you should use other things. For example, in place of a CSS selector, try to test for something a user would call attention to. For example, a little string you see inside of your application, or a heading, or the words inside of a button. Or even better, Choose the selectors which are less prone to change, for example, data attributes. If you refactor your application, it might be the case that you will change some CSS classes or styling, but changing data attributes, especially if you name them like data test or data CY, isn't that common, so they are less prone to change. Last but not least, there's a topic I cannot stress enough, so I need to introduce it as a trap as well inside of here. So it's about this fixed waiting time things, like waiting for half a second every time, and even worse, it's in a command here, so it will be executed way too often. And in best case, it will slow down the test way too much. And it's not necessary at all because our application can be faster. But in the worst case, we will wait too less time on causing flakiness. So fortunately, there's plenty of things to do to avoid fixed waiting time traps. Let's take a look. All the way center around waiting dynamically. And I prefer more deterministic methods that most platforms provide. I brought you my two favorites to use. The first being waiting for changes in the user interface of your application, for example, animations to stop, a loading spinner to disappear, or anything to be loaded. Another possibility would be the waiting for API requests. Cypress provides you neat features for doing that. In this way, your test will stay stable and reliable while managing time efficiently, like this bad boy here. Let's go back to Admiral Akbar. The Battle of Endor turned out to be a success, of course with teamwork and a couple of countermeasures included. Refer that to testing. It might be a lot to do, especially when it comes to legacy code. And it might need a change in mind for test design or lots of refactoring, but it's worth it in the end, and you will feel the rewards. So, the most important things really I want you to remember is referring to the golden rule we talked about earlier. All examples pay in on that. All pain points emerge from ignoring it. It's about keeping your tests easy to read, to maintain, and to keep them easy to understand. It's one sentence I want you to remember from this talk. A test should be a friendly assistant, no hindrance to you. Tests should feel like a routine, not like solving a complex mathematical formula or something. So let's give our best to achieve that. See, R2D2 here is catching bugs with ease here, and I want you to feel like that as well, so that dealing with tests feels lean and like fun and not exhausting, right? So, yeah. What else can I say now then? Thank you for your time and for listening to me. And if you got questions or want to discuss any other traps which might occur to you or any other traps I experienced, please join the Q&A session or talk to me on this conference or afterwards on Twitter or basically wherever you found me. So let's keep that and see you next time. Goodbye.